Did you know that 2/3 of all impulse spending happens in bed on your phone? That's a real stat, by the way. Hi friends, I'm Shauna. Welcome to my channel and welcome to a new video. Today we're talking about impulse spending. We're going to be talking about the three kind of main types of impulse spending, like why we do it, and then we'll use that as a guide to consider how we can stop or change those practices if we're looking to stop impulse spending. Impulse spending really is a tough habit to kick, also because there's so many different kinds of impulse spending. It's not just one way. We can impulse spend in many different kinds of ways, which require different kinds of changes in order to implement to be successful. And even the most successful people, the most, minimal kind of spenders or shoppers or people, they still do this from time to time. They still make mistakes. So as we go through, I hope that you won't beat yourself up or be too harsh or critical on yourself because, you messed up. And impulse spending, it's okay if it happens. We're all human, and buying a cookie from Starbucks that you impulsively added to your coffee order is fine. It's not going to break the bank. But where we get into trouble is when it's our main form of shopping, or we spend majority or a lot of money, more than we can afford to, on impulse spending. According to a 2021 study from Newswire, the average American spends $276 a month on impulse purchases, or $3,312 a year. In order to spend that amount of money in a year, that's $9.04 a day. Sorry, $9.08 a day. That's all it takes to spend over $3,000 in a year. It adds up quick. And we impulse spend in a lot of different categories too. I think on this channel, we're kind of accustomed to thinking through the lens of fashion and beauty, but the number, 3 of the top 6 categories of impulse spending are food, takeout, groceries, coffee. Those are 3 of the top 6. So there's lots of ways for us to overspend, overconsume in an impulsive kind of way. Now, a lot of advice. I feel like the number one kind of piece of advice about how to curb impulse spending is create a budget. I am, in fact, a big advocate of the budget. I love a budget. I came for the budget all day long. But when I was first coming into this world of conscious consumerism, I was one of those people who started and failed pretty quickly. The reason why I struggled, and I've heard from so many of you as well who have struggled with this too, is that creating a budget doesn't actually require you to change any habits. It's basically a one-time action, and you need to, in my opinion, figure out how to change the habits and change how you shop in order for the budget to be effective at all. Your spending might be different for a short while, but you will eventually go back to how things were because nothing has actually changed. You haven't really learned anything. So let's talk about it. We're going to be talking about 3 main categories today, and all 3 fall under habits. They're all habits. The first one is, I think, maybe the most clearly a habit because habits are habits because they're behaviors that we repeat. They become habitual and they become second nature to us, almost like automatic autopilot behaviors. Things that you do almost without a second thought, scrolling in bed or scrolling on your commute to work, treating yourself on a rough day. And I do have a whole video on habits if you want to check that out. I think that's a great video, and I do go more in depth there. So we're going to talk about autopilot behaviors first. I think some of the most common autopilot behaviors would be adding to cart. You have the app on your phone, you go to Amazon, you click, add to cart, checkout. Just the process of whipping out a phone or scrolling in bed, I think are incredibly common. My number one autopilot behavior, which I still do and happened just a handful of days ago. My number one autopilot behavior is seeing something, let's say it's an ad or somebody using your product, or I look into my closet and I go, oh my gosh, I have nothing to wear. and then instantly, within seconds, pull out my laptop, open tabs, and just start looking. It still feels somewhat like an automatic response. It's still like an instant thought that comes into my mind, and I usually am able to catch myself somewhere along the way, either right after the thought, when I'm pulling up my tab, or I'll be like scrolling and I'm like, wait, what am I doing? And then I'll able to like X out. Let me know your autopilot behaviors in the comments. I'm curious to hear what yours are. I've gotten better about pulling the trigger overall. More often than not, so most of the time, I don't pull the trigger. Like 99% of the time. Maybe a little bit less, maybe like 80% of the time. I don't pull the trigger. However, 2 years ago, just the act of opening up the tab, that instinctual open up the tab, was enough to get me to purchase something if I was in an emotionally vulnerable state. This happened to me just a few months ago too. Just opening the tab. If you're not sure what your autopilot behaviors are, this is a fabulous time to check it out, to figure it out. So I think the number one way to do this is to track your spending behavior. Do it for a handful of weeks. You need at least 2. I would recommend probably a full month, and track your spending at the end of the day. The goal of tracking your spending, actually, in my opinion, isn't to change your spending. It's to not change anything and to just be an observer, because it can be tempting to not buy stuff because you know that like you're watching or somebody's watching, but you can't change your behavior if you're not totally sure. So my recommendation to kind of combat that a little bit is to track at the end of the day. So after you've already made your choices, track them and keep it up for about a month. So maybe the first 2 weeks you're a little bit more cognizant, and the last 2 weeks you're more in line with how you would normally spend. And then you can observe. You can see what your main categories are. Like where are you most vulnerable to impulse shopping, or not just where and like where you shop, but also how you shop. Is it in bed scrolling? Is it on your commute? Is it, was something happening that day? Was it on your way home? Like, and which categories as well. Do you have a lot of takeout spending? Do you have a lot of coffee spending, treat spending? Is there a Sephora on your way home from work and you just like to go in and check it out, and every so often you buy something? You'll figure it out. For autopilot behaviors that you are aware of, you know that this is an autopilot behavior, the number one question to ask yourself to change that habit is, how do I make doing this thing as difficult and inconvenient as possible? If you're one of those people who does the add to cart and checks out right away, the way to make that as difficult as possible is to remove the credit card from the site, make your password inaccessible, and then 3, if neither of those work, we want to do this first, delete it off your phone. For me, deleting it off my phone isn't like, that will stop me in some instances, especially like scrolling in bed purchases, but having stuff on my laptop, I can get there too. I, at present, don't have my credit card information in anything. We're not saved anywhere. And I also don't have passwords saved. My Sephora password is really hard. Like, I don't know it. So I have to get in and like enter it in every time. And I have to enter my credit card every time. It's really annoying because I have to go up physically somewhere, go get my credit card, come back. It's like a whole thing. So I have to be prepared mentally in order to make that purchase. And I know I'm in a bad headspace when I will keep my wallet at my desk or keep my wallet on my nightstand. That's how I know I'm in an emotionally vulnerable state, because at that point, I'm just looking to do something, bad, destructive, or just I'm looking to spend money, and there's a lack of intentionality there. So like, that's just like a clue for me and myself. And either way, like, creating barriers doesn't just make it difficult, but it gives you time to think and to consider, or maybe even catch yourself. With food in specific, because we're talking about things like takeout coffee or, extra snacks at the grocery store, we can consider, what habit do you want to have and how do you make doing that as easy as possible? If you want to eat at home more instead of takeout, how do you make doing that as easy as possible? How do you make that as sustainable as possible? And then you can brainstorm solutions to that. And it kind of creates like a really specific question to answer instead of like, how do I stop impulse spending, which can be a really big question and a really kind of larger question that might feel difficult to answer, so you don't even try. You now have something really pointed, really exact that you can truly develop an answer for. Number 2 is the dopamine effect or instant gratification. Shopping can be a real high, and it can feel even better if you get a great deal or you are able to get a bundle, or maybe, I don't know, it's your birthday. Like, there's so many ways that we can make shopping feel extra good, and we can be driven by that instant gratification. We could also, in some ways, go to this if you're looking for retail therapy, but also if you're using shopping as a pick-me-up, as in, I had a bad day, let me grab a thing. Let me do something to cheer me up. And look, I am not above getting something to help you with a bad day. I got a cookie a little while ago, not too long ago. I bought myself a cookie because I had a hard fucking day. And you know what? I felt better. But that's not my norm. Buying myself a little cookie or a bag of Doritos or, I don't know, something small, usually under $10, usually under $5, happens for me, I don't know, once every couple of months. That's not a problem. It becomes the problem when we are like finding excuses and ways to cheer ourselves up or make us feel better or celebrate or had a hard day, had a great day. Like, there's always things that are happening in our lives that can become excuses to shop. But that's not for here and now. In my opinion, overspenders are more affected by instant gratification because I feel like we're already more inclined to shop and to enjoy it more and to already be kind of invested in the shopping experience. I am going to take you to the habit loop for just a second. The loop consists of 4 stages: cue, craving, response, reward. The reward drives the entire loop. And the reward is typically not actually the thing, but it's the dopamine hit. It's the feel-good factor that drives the whole thing. Sometimes it can be a little bit different. Sometimes it doesn't have to be the dopamine hit, but that usually is, or at the very least, a factor of the reward. Because when it comes to over shopping, it's typically not about the thing, but the way that the thing makes us feel. And that, even relatedly, if we're talking kind of about emotions here, that I gotta have it, I need it, that true, oh my God, like in your head, in your heart, you're like convinced that you need it, that lust after that thing. I have felt it too. It can be so strong and it can be so hard to resist. And when you want it, you crave it, you need it, you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It can feel so good to hit submit. You're like, yes, you got it what you wanted. You do your little happy dance and you're just like on cloud 9 riding the high. Oh my God. I can admit that this is a hard habit to change. So how do you do it? How do you change it? Number 1 is to delay the purchase. The number 1 way I've been able to delay it is the not now but later technique. If you've heard this before, you can go ahead and skip over it, but I'm going to talk about it just another time. When we say wait 2 weeks, wait a week, that can feel like an eternity. And if you're truly in the throes of wanting to buy something, because waiting 2 weeks feels like an eternity, you don't want to do it. So you're just going to buy it now because you want it so bad. And it can also feel like you're telling yourself no. Like 2 weeks, saying wait 2 weeks can feel like a no because you're not allowing yourself to buy it now. The not now but later technique is most for those purchases where we feel like we're in the throes of lust and desire and I need it, want it now. So instead of saying, I'm going to wait 2 weeks, I'm going to wait whatever, or even just saying, no, you can't buy it, you're going to say, I'm going to wait a day. Or I'm going to wait 2 days. You're going to wait the maximum amount of time that you can in your mind wait without it feeling like a truly impossible amount. Sometimes for me, that's like 8 hours. Usually not that anymore. Usually it's like a day or two, or like I'll check back on Monday if it's a Friday. I can usually wait a couple of days. And then by the time that Monday rolls around, I'm usually in that a better headspace. Even if I want that thing, I can acknowledge, okay, I'm in the throes of lust. I'm in the throes of, wanting that reward, the dopamine hit. I can acknowledge that now. I still want it, but now I can wait an even longer amount of time, the full, let's say, week or 2 weeks at that point. So when we say not now, but later, we will reevaluate at that later date at 2 days. Like we will reevaluate then, but we're usually in a better headspace to be more realistic, more practical, where we could say no altogether, or we could wait the full amount that we actually wanted. What's helpful in this circumstance too is to think back to all of the times that either you waited and you realize your feelings have changed, or thinking about products that you felt so obsessive over, so gotta need it, gotta want it, gotta have it, and then thinking about how you feel about them now. There's stuff that I've purchased, say a year ago. Let's talk about some of my favorite things of last year that weren't replacements. So let's say something like headbands. I can admit that I was in some parts driven to buy things by that feeling, that dopamine hit, that gotta need it, gotta have it kind of feeling. And there is other stuff that just a week, 2 or 3 weeks ago that I was like, oh my God, lusting after, and I don't feel that way anymore. All of us have had that experience with things, or most of us, with things that we have and haven't purchased. Thinking back, that alone now is usually what will do it. That will just allow me to wait the appropriate amount of time, whatever I deem appropriate, to be able to think about that thing and ask the kinds of questions that I would want to ask. The whole reason why we want to say delay is because we're not in the right frame of mind to think critically or consciously about that purchase. Doesn't mean that the purchase is inherently bad, or that we can't or shouldn't buy it. It's that we are incapable of being critical and being honest with ourselves when we are in those throes of desire. And we need to be able to get to a point where we can think about that thing as objectively as possible and be as critical and ask our questions and be honest with ourselves. Lastly, if you are very seriously feeling those urges and like nothing is working, recalling your financial goals, I think, could be a last resort. I only, personal experience, I only do this in extreme cases because this can quickly turn into a shaming tactic, which I don't want for myself. And what I will do is I will ask myself, is this purchase worth sacrificing my goals for? Is this purchase worth sacrificing my financial future for? It is kind of an extreme question. I started asking myself this when I was during my no-buy because I found myself wanting to break it so often. And so it's like, yeah, it's only a $30 purchase, but then it's like, when I calculate all of the things I want, it's not $30 anymore, it's $742 worth of stuff. And $742 worth of stuff could be a couple of car payments, could be debt payment, could be, like all of your savings that you would normally save for a month. It could be a lot of things. It could be 2 months worth of groceries. It could be a month worth of groceries. Like it could be a lot of things. The last major category is emotional spending. Emotional spending is the one that has been the most difficult habit for me to change. And it's probably, in terms of like overall habits, that's the one, or when it comes to impulse spending, I should say, that's the one that I've held on to the longest. It has been a struggle, and can be for folks, not just me, because emotional spending, or, shopping itself, can be a coping mechanism. And coping mechanisms are, at the end of the day, a habit, but they are habits that have formed in response to stress. So they are a stress response. And so being able to change a stress response habit is incredibly difficult. Not impossible, just challenging. I do actually have a video coming on this topic, and I'm talking about an experience I had last year spending hundreds of dollars on Poshmark and emotional spending. There's a bit of seriousness in there, but it's also more on the lighter side to kind of talk about this subject in a light, maybe somewhat humorous way. Emotions can be very compelling reasons to act because we don't want to feel those emotions anymore, or instead of just having that over with, we don't want to acknowledge them. We don't want to go down that road. We don't want to think about it. We want a distraction. And so shopping can serve either of those purposes. Shopping can be a distraction behavior, but it can also be a way for us to deal with our emotions. We're still like not really dealing with them. We're dealing with, let's say, the emotional response of that thing. And it's an outlet for our emotional response. Scrolling through Poshmark or scrolling through your favorite website can be a distraction from the thoughts and feelings that you are having. We can also seek out destructive behaviors if we're feeling self-destructive, which can be shopping, which can be spending beyond our means, which could be, just doing things we know are bad for us. If you're someone who is dealing with something like this, I highly recommend speaking with a therapist. Absolutely. In my opinion, there is great strength in knowing when you need help, and also a great amount of self-awareness too. And these are things to be proud of that you are able to do for yourself. So I want to say that before we continue. And so I'm just going to speak for myself on a personal level. When I am participating in this kind of behavior, it's usually an avoidance technique opposed to a heavy emotions technique. As in, like, I want this thing for the outlet for the emotion that I'm feeling, like I'm feeling sad or angry or unhappy. And so my most successful strategy has been swapping out one distracting technique with another. You can figure out what might be an alternative distracting technique. The best ones for me are offline, reading as an example, going for a walk, cooking. Like, you could do literally anything else, hopefully offline. Even if you want to clean your kitchen, even if you want to fold your clothes, I don't know, talk to a friend, listen to music, watch TV. All of those could be healthier ways of distracting that you are not spending money or not, let's say, harming yourself in terms of like your budget or your body or things like that. For a while, I was going to journaling and trying to do more self-reflexive or, dealing with the emotions head on. That is when I typically, let's say, failed and would go back to my original coping mechanism, because journaling is not a distracting technique. It's a deal with it technique. And I typically am going to the coping mechanism because I don't want to deal with it. So that's not an appropriate replacement, and ended up driving me more to the habit I wanted to avoid than anything else. Changing habits is a hard thing to do. So I hope you will have some grace with yourself. I hope you will have some kindness and self-compassion with yourself as you are trying to change and evolve. As long as you are willing to change and grow, you're doing it right. If you are looking to change a habit, I would recommend using like a habit snowball technique, which is very similar to the debt snowball. A debt snowball is when you start with the smallest debt first, usually, like, by smallest, I mean the least amount, and then using that to build momentum in order to tackle the bigger and bigger debts. You're using momentum because you're getting that win and you're feeling encouraged to keep going. I suggest doing the same thing with habits. Go for the easiest habits first, what might be the low-hanging fruit, things that would seem to be the easiest for you to implement, so then you can build momentum and you can use those wins to eventually work up to more difficult or harder habits. And then you'll hopefully be able to see positive changes and rewards and keep going. And failing is part of the journey. Like, you're supposed to fail. Like, you're supposed to get it wrong. And that's how you learn and you grow and you evolve. And embracing the failures, embracing the you got it wrongs are, I think, a great place to be in, because you get to learn and change. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed chatting about impulse spending. I would love to know your techniques in the comments. What has worked for you? How have you been successful? Let a girl know. Yeah, thanks for hanging out with me today, and I hope to see you again around here soon. Bye.